Hey, lovely people, a pleasant evening to everybody. All right, beautiful people. So I realized the opposition, they were basically lambasting the school buses for the rural areas that the government had fairly recently brought in. So, when I heard the leader of the opposition speaking and say the old 100 old buses and so on, I said to myself, I really need to go and research to see, if these are really archaic buses, if they're old jalopies. The buses are very old and dingy, broken down, and the poor children are suffering in these buses because when he said 100 older buses, I said, my God, this is an unfortunate situation. So let me go and really look and see what the buses are like. But when I saw the buses, it is actually, to my surprise and pleasure, to see that these are the buses that I see outside of our country. Usually you see them in the US and in Canada and so on, even in recent times, because to me, one of the reasons why they have those archaic looking style buses, and I say archaic and, or vintage, let's use the word vintage, type looking, buses is that the material that makes it up. Jamaicans say, oh, like all iron, it's strong. I don't know if people remember the VW, the old time VW vehicles. I saw one in fairly recent time that somebody somehow remodeled a little bit, and they sprayed over and whatnot, and the motor vehicle is moving like nothing. I said, that motor vehicle, whoever made those old time VWs was very wise. It's a strong motor vehicle. God forbid you meet in a motor vehicle accident. I pray for the other top end vehicles, the high end vehicles, because they're going to feel an earth shattering blow to their motor vehicle, and the VW is just going to be quite fine because of the material that is made in it. Secondly, one of the beautiful things that I noticed with the buses is that it doesn't seem to have, the very loud and raucous radio system in it. When you hear the blaring music in the early morning or even in the afternoon when children should be focused on either going to school or focused going home to do their homework, to rest a while and then to eat and get themselves ready for the next day. So they go into the buses, focus on going to school, and when they're coming home, they focus on going home without any loud raucous music in the bus. So, as I said, I've been looking. So I was looking in the bus to see if the seats, if the material inside, the makeup inside, the model inside was very dingy when the, minister said old buses, because I'm looking for something very old and tattered and looking really bad, in all honesty, that was a very unfortunate comment to make, to be honest. It's one of those vintage school buses, which I know they still use in North America and other places, because, as I mentioned, it is a very sturdy and formidable bus that, God forbid, if it should meet in an accident, the impact may not be as grave as if it were another a bus that is not as sturdy and formidable in terms of the makeup of the bus. Secondly, again, for me, children need to focus when they're going to school without any loud, blaring, vulgar, crude, and lewd music playing in buses. So I'm glad. And it just gives a very, for me, it's like dressing up a child. I don't like when, I don't, for me, I don't like when children are dressed like adults, where they look like a big woman. I prefer when they have in their ribbons or their bubbles and the clips and whatnot when they're children. You get older, yes, the clips may not be as pronounced, but you still have that youthfulness about you, that school nature or school vibe about you, to indicate that you're still on the edge, indicate that you're still youthful and young, So the school buses give that kind of energy. It makes you focus on school, and a lot of people think that these small things, they don't count, but they really do count. So I would want to think, because I can hardly believe the minister, that he must have meant vintage when he said old. Because it gives the impression that it comes from an ill-minded place. Let's use that word. I don't want to use our regular colloquial term that we tend to use. It seemed to have come from a place that is not necessarily good. If you had said, boy, it's one of those vintage type school buses, which again is still used, when you go North America, when you go Canada, and so on, and it is very much suitable for the children. All right, he said, I heard the minister mentioning 100 bus, not knowing how many children, because quite a number of rural children and so on. If you have half a bread versus zero bread, let us say two things are offered to you: half a loaf versus zero loaf. Which will you take, especially in a time of famine? Which is the better of the two, to take half a loaf or zero loaf? Just asking. One of the problems is that sometimes we think a little bit too faster than how the cognitive cells are moving. Because at least for if they have 100 buses, and it can carry, I'm not sure what the regular number of people at 100 buses, but maybe a decent number of students can hold in each bus. you know I'm just like a 30 seater, maybe 30 something, I don't know, 40, I'm just guessing, because they're very, it's elongated or so. I'm looking at the length of it and so on. So I'm just guessing something. I don't know what the seating capacity is. So maybe it's 30, maybe it's 40, maybe it's less. Over, I mean, and it's 100 of them. It's quite a number of students that will be taken to school. Isn't that a good thing, as opposed to zero number of students being taken to school in this fashion? As opposed to, a zero number of students being taken to school in such fashion. I figured that that would be such a great, beautiful, and grandiose move. At least they have the opportunity to know, get to go to school on time and so on, with, as I said, half a loaf versus zero loaf. I could understand if you have, with everything, there is always a sort of a new perspective, a quantum perspective, a different perspective. Then you could say, all right, I don't think it's sufficient, but what we can do is also look at the fact that maybe students, how is it that they're going to manage if they're from impoverished homes and they don't have enough lunch money? How will the government offset that? Is there any subsidiary in place, or subsidy in place, I should say, in terms of books and so on? Do they have sufficient stationery? Everything that can help with the mental, psychological, and social and educational upliftment of the child, as opposed to saying old buses. Those are antique, vintage, appropriate buses for schools. Those are the buses that need to be both in Kingston and outside of Kingston to transport children. Because sometimes when I hear these other means of transportation taking them, it is just atrocious, the kinds of music, the way how they hang in the bus. And I mean, not necessarily the students, but everyone is mixed up. This is no children focused, children centered. So we have all on sundry on it. You have one or two adults to monitor to ensure that all goes well. I saw the buses on social media, both inside and outside. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. That didn't even come across, I'm sure, a lot of people's minds, to say old buses, until it was said by the leader of the opposition. That was not. I'm disappointed, to be very honest. I would have preferred that you just tackle other issues that you think are more, as I said, neocentric, that would create, better opportunity and to help with the welfare, the wellness, the growth, and the development of the children. Nothing is wrong with the buses at all. The buses are quite fine. They're children focused, student focused, without any loud raucous music, and they can get to probably study a little bit before going to school. Guys, you know what to do. Read TikTok and YouTube. Subscribe. give me one of those lions. Thank you.